Folks, out of all of the character archetypes in fighting games, which ones are the strongest and which ones are the weakest? That is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to be doing a bit of a comparison of if you're picking up a fighting game and you want to know which character archetypes to gravitate towards if you want to play a strong character. I'm going to try to let you guys know. So this is not going to be a comprehensive list. Obviously, there's like a million possible arguable character archetypes. You know, there's like puppet characters and trap characters, but we're talking about sort of the most common ones that are seen in pretty much every fighting game, and we're going to be ranking them according to which ones are strong and which ones are weak. So there are obviously exceptions. You guys can go ahead and finish writing out those comments, you know, like, oh, if you think that type of character is weak, a scrimblow bimblow with like a word, like, that's fine. You can go ahead and write the comment, but we are talking purely on average. There are, of course, exceptions, but this is my opinion on the types of character archetypes that end up rising to the top and the ones that end up stuck at the bottom of the tier list in most games. So let's jump right into it and start out with one of the weaker character archetypes, perhaps the weakest on average. And that is gonna be grapplers. I feel like grapplers can never really catch a break. Usually in a lot of fighting games, if you look at who is the worst character in the game, it oftentimes ends up being a grappler. And why is that? So I think there's a few reasons. For one thing, I think grapplers, a lot of people consider them not very fun to play against. You can't really run your usual game plan against a grappler. If you try to, you know, rush them down and combo them, you're probably going to get command grabbed. It doesn't feel that good. It doesn't feel that fun for a lot of players. So I think developers intentionally kind of undertune grapplers. And, you know, command grabs are really strong. They can't be teched. And usually they do pretty good damage, but the thing is, let's look at Marvel vs. Capcom for an example. Like, yeah, Zangief can spinning pile driver you, and it does pretty good damage, 42 damage, but it leaves you full screen, and you can't combo after it, and that's the end of the situation. You landed the grab, and that's all you're gonna get. But other characters, you know, they're just gonna do a combo, and that's just going to do way more damage, and it's going to leave them in a better position, and they have the possibility to go into super or whatever. So generally, other characters are going to be able to do just as much damage as a grappler because they have more combo potential. And obviously, they don't have the major downsides that grapplers are very, very slow. They're big targets, so they're easy to hit, and they can only really do stuff when they get close to you. So grapplers, yeah, there are, of course, some strong ones like Z Broly in Dragon Ball FighterZ, or like Clark in King of Fighters. There are some exceptions, but in general, I feel like grapplers just don't really have the sauce in most games. And maybe it's for good reason. Maybe if grapplers were top tier, games wouldn't be that fun for a lot of people. I don't know. What do you guys think? All right, next up, I'm going to talk about another sort of long-suffering fighting game character archetype. In recent years, I feel like zoners are almost never good. Zoners, projectile characters, keep away characters, whatever you want to call them, they always have some pretty big problems, I feel. I think one big problem that zoners have is that as time goes on, fighting game developers have added more and more tools for getting around projectiles. People don't like being kept away at full screen all game. They like to get in and have fun. So, you know, they add stuff like Super Dash, which is just going to go straight through a lot of projectiles and close the gap for you and let you get massive damage. And oftentimes the risk reward for being a projectile using character is not really that much in your favor. You know, when you're landing hits with projectiles, you're just kind of getting stray chipping damage, like little bits that add up over time. But then if you make one mistake and the opponent gets close to you one time, they are going to do more damage to you than like 100 of your fireballs did to them. So you have to play really perfectly. There's very little room for error. I think a lot of people, myself included, were really excited to play Launcher in DNF Duel. You know, this is a really cool character who has this massive array of projectiles to keep the opponent away with. But it turns out there's this big problem where there's other characters that not only are they better up close than Launcher is, but they also have these huge, like, nearly full screen attacks that they can combo off of, get insane damage. A lot of characters even have full screen supers. They're just gonna hit you from full screen with their super when you're trying to do projectiles and just completely destroy your life bar. So it's hard out there for a zoner, guys. I know that they're annoying to fight. I know it doesn't feel good to just get hit by fireballs all day, But, you know, a lot of games these days, zoners are a big struggle. Yes, there are exceptions. Netherrealm games tend to have pretty strong zoners, so there is somewhere that the projectile characters can thrive. But in a lot of games, you know, DNF Duel, a lot of people consider Launcher to be bottom 2, maybe even bottom 1. So it's kind of tough, guys. But now let's move on to a character archetype that actually is pretty strong. And this is going to be shotos. So if you guys don't know, shotos are characters based on Ryu and Ken. They are going to have an invincible uppercut. They're going to have a hurricane kick or some kind of forward moving kick attack. And of course, they're going to have a Hadouken or a fireball. So shotos, you know, a lot of times they are not the most powerful character in the game, but there are exceptions. Obviously, Evil Ryu is insanely powerful in Street Fighter 4. Akuma is very strong in a lot of games. And in general, shotos tend to be, you know, pretty well-balanced characters who have a lot of tools to work with. This basic game plan of throwing fireballs and then uppercutting the opponent when they try to jump over, this is pretty effective in a lot of games. Shotos also tend to have some pretty strong normals, so they usually have a far-reaching crouching medium kick that can be canceled into fireball. In Street Fighter games, shotos tend to have a very strong sweep as well. Their sweep can be hard to punish. They usually have pretty good frame advantage on a lot of their close-up normals as well. And one major thing that I think shotos have going for them is that the developers know that this is probably going to be the first character that a lot of people pick, especially new players. They're going to want to try the shoto because they're like the guy on the box. They're like usually the main character. So Yu Narukami is a good example from Persona 4 Arena. You know, obviously he's got a fireball. He doesn't have a hurricane kick, but he does have this sort of sliding kick that throws him towards the opponent, and of course he has an invincible uppercut. And usually because they are like the main character, they're the guy on the box that they expect that a lot of people are going to try first, they usually make them able to use all the mechanics of that particular game very well. So, you know, Yu Narukami, like any good shoto, he's got really good normals, both for on the ground and for anti-air, but he's also very strong with his persona. So obviously the persona is like the defining mechanic of Persona 4 Arena, and Yu Narukami can interact with his persona in some very fun and interesting ways. And by playing this character, you will learn how to use your persona in an effective way so that you can carry over those skills to the other characters. So I think that's true for a lot of shoto characters, is that by learning them, you're going to kind of learn the basic mechanics of the game, and you'll be able to do pretty well with most characters. So I think because of this, shotos, even though they're not always the best, number one most overpowered character in the game, they're almost always viable. They're almost always pretty good. And I think that there are very few games you're going to find where the shotos are truly awful. I mean, maybe like Morrigan in Vampire Savior is like pretty bad, but Dimitri is kind of a shoto too, and he's not that bad, so I don't know. For the most part, you're going to do pretty fine if you just pick a shoto. And while we're on the subject of Vampire Savior, this makes a nice transition to what I would consider generally the strongest archetype in fighting games, which is going to be rushdown characters. So Zabel or Lord Raptor in Vampire Savior, usually considered by most to be the strongest character in the game, and he is, of course, a rushdown character. More specifically, the kind of old school term for a character like this, people would call them pixies. Storm and Magneto from Marvel vs. Capcom are also examples. Usually pixies are going to have a fast air dash, which lets them hit you overhead. They usually have below average health, but that's not necessarily a requirement. But they're definitely always going to have really insane mix-up with high-low, and they're always going to have really good combos, and especially the ability to sort of loop combos. So the idea is that, you know, you get a hit, you knock the opponent down, and then you're just mixing them up again so they have to guess. That is a very strong tactic that a lot of rushdown characters have access to. QB as well, by the way, the other character that's on screen here, also a top tier character in Vampire Savior, also a rushdown character with a very fast air dash for overheads, and a character that you would consider a pixie in kind of old school parlance. And if we go back to DNF Duel for a second, who is the number one character that is on everyone's mind in terms of kind of breaking the game, being ridiculously overpowered? It is, of course, Swiftmaster, who, as the name implies, very fast character, a very rushdown heavy character, and he can really do it all. I think it's a common trap that developers fall into where they think, okay, we're going to give a character really low health. Swiftmaster has 850 health, tied for lowest in the game, and they just kind of assume that they can make everything else about the character good, and the fact that they have low health is going to balance them out. Of course, Akuma was the original character like this. Akuma always has the lowest health in Street Fighter games, and usually ends up pretty good. I just feel like health is not enough to balance a character that's really fast, a character that has really good combo potential, and usually rushdown characters are going to have some of the best combos in their respective fighting games, and they're usually going to be very hard to keep away from you. Like, they can get past your projectiles and your long range very easily, and they're very hard to block. They can mix you up very effectively as well. So in a lot of games, I would say the #1 character in a lot of games is usually a rushdown character. Storm in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Obviously, Swiftmaster in DNF Duel. Zero in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. This is a ridiculous rushdown character, and this is another character where clearly they thought by giving him really, really low HP, Zero has extremely low HP, they must have thought that would be enough to balance this character, but no, he's insanely broken, and he really, really dominates top-level play of this game, and rushdown characters do tend to be some of the dominant characters in a lot of games. So I think, again, it's partially sort of mistakes in balance, but it's also partially just that it's exciting to see a character who's really fast, a character who does crazy combos, a character who's zooming around the screen. A lot of people would rather watch that than a character who sits way back and throws projectiles. To a lot of people, that's kind of boring. Personally, I like zoning, I like projectiles, but I can kind of understand why some people like the explosive nature of rushdown characters better. So maybe that's why rushdown characters tend to end up pretty broken, but I'm sure there are some exceptions. Can you guys let me know down in the comments? Do you know of any fighting games where the meta is dominated by, say, a grappler? I would love to hear about it. The closest thing I can think of is like Z Broly in Dragon Ball FighterZ, but is he even really a grappler? I don't know if that counts, but let me know. Or if you know of games other than NRS games where zoners tend to be really strong or where rushdown characters tend to be weak, I would love to hear about it down in the comments. But let me know if you enjoyed the video and whether you agree or disagree with my ranking. And let me know some other character archetypes that you'd like to hear me talk about in a future video. So with that, we're going to end things. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one, guys. Bye-bye.